Welcome to the Heartstrong podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Lindberg. Like many of you, I'm living a life that I just did not expect. And over the years, I've come to value the idea of living heartstrong, of growing through the challenges in my life, and let's face it, the challenges in our times. And I'm on a mission to help you do the same. So each week, I talk to thought leaders, authors, experts, and everyday amazing people who have something to teach us all about living fully amidst our struggles. I have learned so much from others along my journey, and so I hope that my guests will help you on yours. Let's get started. On today's podcast, I'm joined by Gabby Gouveia. Gabby is the executive director and co-founder of Let Grace In, which is a nonprofit organization that supports families after the death of their child. They have an amazing organization which offers programs including monthly therapeutic events, the Hope Retreat, and the Grief Recovery Method educational series. And really, Let Grace In is all about encouraging resilience and community in practical ways to move through grief. All of this was created by Gabby's sincere desire to support bereaved families after the death of her own son, Grayson, which she will tell you about shortly. Gabby is a grief recovery specialist, a speaker, and an advocate for bereaved families, and she is the author of a new book, which we're also going to talk about, called My Journey with the Wind, A Magical Story of Grief. Gabby currently works as a registered nurse and has worked in nursing leadership and intensive care, all kinds of nursing Gabby has done for many people. She was also recently recognized as the Nurse of the Year for Community Stewardship. She's an all-around amazing woman. Gabby and her life partner, Kaeo, live in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I would love to be today, with their two daughters, Olivia and Charlie. So welcome to the podcast, Gabby. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you, Jessica. Aloha.
Aloha. I'm so looking forward to this conversation for many reasons. And, we've talked before this and we have many ideas and thoughts in common in our life. And so I'm really excited for people to learn from you today. That's why we're here. So I want to start the podcast talking about Grayson, your son, and the inspiration for the work that you're doing. So tell us about Grayson and what he's taught you in your life.
Yes, thank you. Grayson's been the most important teacher, I think, in my life overall. He was our first child. And so, that transition of becoming a new parent was so exciting. And we just, we marveled in all of the little things he did and how funny he was and how sweet his personality was. And he was a lover. And he was somebody that was so easy to connect to. And he loved garbage trucks and Power Rangers and all those things. We had Olivia shortly after, maybe about 3 years, and joined our family. Like when I share about Grayson, I always love to bring a little picture. And I know not everybody's going to be able to see this as they're listening, but this picture is of him on the beach. Holding up his little I love you sign with this sign language on his hand, and he's got his tongue out. And this was, depicts about, his goofy, fun personality. And he was kind of more of a laid back boy, not that typical, very rambunctious, high energy activity little guy. But when he was 5 years old, he was starting to have some vomiting. And he wasn't able to, we call it slipper instead of flip-flop here in Hawaii. He wasn't able to keep those on his left foot. And it was kind of weird. And as an intensive care nurse for 15 years at the time, I knew something was wrong and took him to the pediatrician several times and wanted to believe, it was unrelated or something else. And one day we took him to the emergency room after about 3 weeks of symptoms and clear blood tests, and found out that he had a brain tumor. And it took them quite a while to kind of figure out and diagnose him, because that week we were admitted. He had a tumor resection. They sent it away. It was about 6 weeks before we found out that it was a very aggressive brain cancer called glioblastoma, which is rare in children. And that I remember that day that our pediatrician called us. I was in the Target parking lot and nobody else was with me. And understanding medical terminology, I heard very clearly that this was something with no standard treatment and no
Mm.
cure. And we were, told we'd be focusing on his quality of life, that Grayson
Wow.
wouldn't survive. And I remember driving home, not knowing, am I going to make it? And just in rage. I
Yeah.
think that was kind of like the beginning of my journey of my grief, looking back, screaming at the top of my lungs for God to cure my son. And I remember the burning in my throat, um, and just that initial just devastation, that moment of kind of hopelessness where you can't imagine this journey ahead of you, with someone you love so much and not knowing what you are about to face. And we eventually got an experimental program, but it was hard. We had to learn how to like swallow pills and wrap them in fruit roll-ups, and just the journey of childhood cancer is just so difficult. And as a parent, you just feel so out of control and so helpless, and witnessing your child go through all that is really painful. So I remember laying in my bed and having a moment with God and just being like, I don't know why this is happening, but I'm, whatever it is, I don't get it, but I'm in. Like, just tell me what
Mm.
to do. I had to just surrender that moment and trust that whatever was happening at that moment, I couldn't control it, but I needed to trust that I just needed to lean on something much bigger, greater, and more powerful than my own human strength. And that was kind of like the beginning of our journey together. And 9 months later, Grayson went through a lot of surgeries and chemo and all of those things, and eventually died in our home.
Mm.
And that was in 2016. And the last 2 weeks, Grayson just had these like amazing words of encouragement, I think, for me to make sure that I would be able to survive. But somehow I think the veil was so thin and he was kind of maybe moving back and forth, through this like energy exchange, and was just, sharing that sometimes you can't help the things you have to go through amidst deep pain. He was sharing these things. And, before he died, like, just to say, like, don't worry, those were the last things, the words that he
That's what
said
he
to me.
told you. He
Yeah.
said to you not to worry. Wow.
Yeah. And just to basically, I think, believe, just keep going, just continue to, you know, don't worry about this battle within, this grief that you're going to be left with here, but just believe, and basically, I love you and I'll always be
Mm.
with you. I think that was a big thing that continues, to be with me, and to choose love over and over again as much as I could in my life, and something that really stays with me always. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mentioned God, and I'm wondering, when you were in that anger place of that just enraging anger, and I it brings tears to my eyes to listen to you, because I felt the things that you said, and our stories are different, but I remember telling my husband I wanted to take a baseball bat to the windows at the hospital. Not because I was just so mad. I was
Yeah.
so mad. It's like there was so much rage. And so when you were in that place, I mean, did you waver in your faith? Did you find it comforting? Like, how was that for you?
The anger part, this is something that I always kind of looked back and say, where was I angry? Because I generally don't
Mhm.
feel like an angry person, but as I've kind of like moved through my grief and examined things more closely, it's like, no, I had a deep rage in this moment. And I don't think I was necessarily thinking or worrying about my faith, but I think that I knew God could take it. Like, I
Mm.
was just so honest. um and I had wavered in my faith before. So, all through my 20s, I grew up Catholic, and I had gone after that, after college, like really deciding, like, what do I want? What does real life look like with God? Like, what does that even mean? Have I just been, following along and doing these rituals? And I didn't have a real personal connected relationship with God. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the mentorship. And I think I didn't have the like community that matched what I needed to
Mm,
really feel like I could get to that deeper level of faith. And this complete brokenness in my life really invited me into a personal relationship with God that I had never ever felt before. And
mm,
and so maybe at this point it was an opportunity to just be so emotionally truthful and honest with the creator, like he could take it. So I guess
mm,
maybe it was building trust with him. Maybe it
mm,
was like a moment where I could just demand from God to cure my son, just in that pure, honest, emotional space, and just be completely real. And he's always been there and held me in whatever phase. So I guess this was part of our journey together of maybe
mhm.
connecting deeper. Um, yeah, and then came that trust portion of like, okay, I get it. I'm not the one in control, like all this time I thought I was
Yes.
controlling things, and we do control our effort and our attitude for sure. I think
Yeah.
we do play a role and we do have free choice, and whether or not, but this was like my opportunity to lean in a way I never had done before.
Mm, yeah. I love how you said it was an opportunity because, I think sometimes when we're going through hard things, or especially from the outside, when people are looking in at us going through something, we rarely think of it as an opportunity. But I do believe the same. I think that our heartaches are our most amazing opportunities, really. Um, so I want to know you. So Grayson died 9 months after he was diagnosed, and then what? And then what? How did Let Grayson, which I love the name, it's so cool. How did that come to be?
Um, you know, I think it's so funny. So Let Grayson,
Mhm.
I maybe was meant to be all along and I didn't
Mm,
know. Maybe I'm just a part of the process. I'm just a tool and a vessel for this love to be out in the world, because I do feel like there was no plan there. I have no business background. There, my husband, thankfully, is an entrepreneur and has a lot of different business backgrounds, so he takes care of all the kind of the back of the house and the logistical things. But yeah, I think Let Grayson is just a journey and another invitation, another opportunity into discovering more of my gifts and talents, and
mhm,
also in a way to bring Grayson's love into the world in a tangible way,
mhm,
without really realizing. So I think that through my own healing process, that I discovered a way to just be love in his honor, or to begin this space that would invite other practitioners who practice this heart medicine. One of our team members, our child life, she just shared that recently, that when she joined the team, she felt like, oh, everyone is practicing in this way that's different than the outside world and our day jobs, that it's a very centered, intuitive place where creativity is allowed, and maybe we try to realize the best parts of ourselves and express them with our gifts within this organization.
mm,
And so I never really had a plan for that, but my therapist had said, well, maybe you should do something with grief. And I was like, oh, it's too heavy. It's too ugly. It's too big. Like, what could I possibly offer? Um, and sometimes it's just that willingness to try. and
Mm.
to follow that most inner, wise, whole, centered part of ourselves that wants to speak up, but we
Yeah.
silence.
Yeah. You said there are a couple things. First of all, I love the idea of heart medicine because I think at the end of the day, that's what people need most in our world, right? I mean, we can't always cure the illness. I mean, you and I both know that.
Yes.
Um, but I think we can help people experiencing healing in their hearts. I mean, I think that's possible for physically healthy people and ill people, right? Like our hearts can always experience healing. And I think perhaps that's the most important work of our time. As I look at my experience and watching people for a very long time. So I think that that's really beautiful. And I want to ask you too, you said something about basically something being born in you into this organization that you've created that you weren't even really expecting. And I'm wondering, when Grayson died physically, left his physical body, was something born in you that wasn't that maybe was obviously always there, but didn't have breath yet?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I really think, I love how you say we're made for our lives,
Mm,
and that these experiences, I really do feel like Grayson's life and death really, brought something alive in me for sure, 100% more than any other experience. And part of that, I think, is because it's like the deepest, most painful thing, but also it expanded the spectrum on the other end, the
yeah.
joy, and that I didn't even know I wasn't living fully before.
Mm,
I didn't even realize that I was limiting my fullest, greatest joy. I guess that's like being back in touch with like that child that just plays and experiences life fully. And I had experienced all of that before, but yeah, definitely a new way, a new clarity, a new, like all of these cliches that I had heard before, I finally understood differently. And even love, like it's an overused word, but at the core of what it was, and in real action, and that like true sacrifice, and then also the concept of like all of this pain and then all of this deep beautiful love, like connected side by side, both existing in the same space. That wholeness was really new too. Um, and for sure, you know, that opportunity to decide, like, what is a meaningful life? What does that mean? What do I really actually want now that it's torn, and everything is torn down, and I have lost something, the most precious, right? Our children are the most precious things. Like, I've lost so much. Um, it sort of began a bravery and maybe
mhm.
like a fearlessness in like, well, now that I've lost it all, and I
Yeah.
realize none of this material things and worldly values matter, what does? And what
Mhm.
is in me? And this was a whole new way of thinking and being just in life, and learning also too to hear and learn to listen and quiet down to try to figure out for myself, like, what is it, what is my life trying to say to me,
Mm,
and
I
then
love that.
also hanging on to like this greater like love force that was connecting me and Grayson and everyone, I think, in this world now. And leaning in on that and trying to tune in my radio to the right station, like I had to switch
Yeah.
stations because I had this like other music that really wasn't, vibing with me anymore.
Mhm.
And so definitely for sure new things. And and a new adventure in a way, but very painful one at the same time.
But it sounds like an expansiveness I'm hearing in your story. You felt like you were expanding in a way which is never comfortable, right? I think our kids, and just having a sick child expands you, because then you become aware of a part of life that you didn't know existed or ever wanted to know existed. And then having him die is another expansiveness. And you know, I just thought of this as I was sitting here. I do believe we're invited to our life. And I think that is, you know, a hard thing some days for me to admit to myself. I'm like, oh gosh, this is not what I really was hoping for, you know?
Yeah.
But and that's just honest. But I
Right.
believe it with everything that I know, that whoever you are, whatever you're facing, there is something in that for you. And, you know, I think sometimes some people just have a hard time. I think some people get kind of stuck in that space. And I think a lot of mothers do, who have sick children or whose children have died. And I feel that temptation days some still. I mean, it'll be 10 years that Ethan died this May, which seems like a really long time in the clock world, but it's not. I still feel so connected to him, and I'm so thankful for that. But there is sometimes this pull back. I feel like this rope, wants to pull you down into the sadness. And I think we do need to allow ourselves to be there. But I also feel this pull to continuous expansion, continuous love, continuous
Yes.
growth. Like, talk to me about that, and how you've said more yeses to the growth and fewer to the, I don't want to say sadness, because I think sadness is okay. I don't think we should ever shove anything down. So I don't want to give that, but just the I feel like the low energy or the low vibration of continuous sadness versus the high vibration of love and growth and expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%, because I think the only way through is to feel all right. To get to the other end, you've got to go through all of that. Yes.
Yeah.
That we focus on like the work of it, that showing up. And it's funny that you're saying yes, because that was actually something I said to myself, like, okay, Gabby,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how uncomfortable, right at the beginning of my grief, we got to figure out what we're going to do here. So you need to
Yeah.
like say yes, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't want to go. You got to try it. You got to do it. You got to just go there. You have to tell yourself that this is your job. This moving through grief and this learning and figuring it out, and we don't know where we're going or what's happening, but we got to do something. We got to move towards something. And Grayson says love, and I felt that in my body. So
Mm.
remembering that, and when the waves come, okay, allow yourself some space for that, so it
Yes.
doesn't pile up. We don't shove it somewhere,
Yep.
let's spend a moment in that, but let's not be that. Let's not
Right.
be my grief. Okay, Gabby, like let's just, I did a lot of self-talk through this, right? Because you gotta like
Yes.
really coach yourself through it. It's just like, okay, you don't want to work out, then find a way that feels good. And I did a ton of hiking, and I had friends that, companioned me and pulled me out and got me out of the house in the sunshine and nature. And then I was like, ooh, that felt good. Let's do more of
Mm-hmm.
that. So I also was reading books and listening to podcasts and things. And um, Resilient Grieving by Lucy Hohn. She is like a researcher, and she was like comparing like natural disasters to grief once her daughter died. But she was saying like, okay, you got very little energy in grief, so you just better use it in the way that feels good. So things that help, do more of that. And that's kind of a logical way of kind of moving through anything, right? So, like, don't try to force yourself to do it the way someone else did it, because you got to speak and walk your own journey. And you got to know from that part of yourself what's actually really working. Like, let's get honest with ourselves. Like, if you're trying to tell yourself you need to do XYZ because that person does it, well, if it doesn't feel good to you and it's not helping, it's obviously not your path, and to just ask yourself, or to ask myself, what does feel good, what is working, do more of that. And I did check in a lot with God, like, okay, God, what is it? And I felt like it was like a little assignment, and he went
Mm.
slow at the beginning. He's like, just sit across the table from trusted friends where you can be emotionally honest and just do that for a while. And then he started allowing me to reveal like, oh, there's actually some tension and hangups and leftover baggage in this relationship. Why don't you put some energy towards that? And
Wow.
so I didn't realize that my grief work was going to be so much of my own interpersonal work. But I found that I think if you want to be the better anything, mother, worker, sister, brother, daughter, nurse, that you just got to keep pulling back those layers or figuring out what the next assignment is to get towards something that opens up a more true, authentic version of yourself. Because we're all that best selves under there. It's just covered up with garbage, and things
Yeah.
that we've collected or self-talk that's negative. And I've had a lot of that too for myself. So
Mm.
even just realizing what I was holding, carrying, believing, to start some sort of change is recognizing that. And so through all these little things, I think there were tiny little light bulbs, and I live for those light bulbs because I want to know, oh, and so I think that sort of gets addicting in a way where you feel like, you know what, oh my god, 1 year later I feel so different. Or it
Mhm.
does take time, and it's these tiny itty bitty little pieces, but yeah, saying yes to all of those spaces and doing things towards something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, we live in a culture where people want, and we're human, so I get it. They want, the 5 steps or the 10 steps, and that is just not real. And it's, not a linear life. It's not, there aren't those things. But I love how you said you just went to the next assignment. That's so cool because I think that that's right. You go and you do the next thing and then you find out what's next. And I know I've struggled with that even in, having a nonprofit also, and you get nervous about things and you wonder where things are going to go. I've really learned to just say, okay, well, if this is meant to continue, then it will continue. If not, there'll be something else. Right. And so I think there is a freedom that we get when we have had to face these kinds of things. That is really a gift. That's one of the gifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just don't know you can live that way. And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you have a perfect life in any way whatsoever. There's
No.
always so hard. There's always more work, right? This is like a misunderstanding, but there is some freedom. You're right in this like recognition of like, oh, wow, like if I just trust and feel and move through, like, and that you can experience it in all different ways, like
Right.
I'm a nurse and I do nonprofit work. So then I started like feeling this way in my nursing life, and it changed the way that I interacted with patients and
I'm
families.
sure.
Yeah, and so there, it's just fascinating. I just feel like it feels like I'm more alive than I ever was
Mm,
before, and
mm.
that feels good.
That
And I want
feels
more of
good.
that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So you started Let Grayson, and tell us about your mission. Like, what are you here to do with Let Grayson? What do you feel called to? How do you feel called to serve people through your organization?
Yeah, well, our mission in general is to restore hope, by building community and then fostering the whole person, right? Spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, the whole person, a holistic approach, fostering that well-being. And the programming started with our monthly events and just kind of bringing people together. So that community, I think grief can be so isolating, and especially in child loss, there's a lot of different kinds of grief, and I'm talking about loss from death, but then divorce and separation, all kinds. I mean, grief is all kinds of loss and change together.
Mm-hmm.
But child loss is not common. I didn't have any friends in my personal circle who had lost a child. And so coming together with other people in the community who had more of a similar loss in that sense really felt like vital to the process and normalizing what I felt. And I've gotten over time more comfortable being able to say, yeah, I was raging and I do lay on my shower floor and cry, and that's normal. And I did think about, how am I ever going to live again? Do I want to? And
Yep.
that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we get that when we get to be together, and we come in an environment that is safe, where we really care about one another, whether we're strangers or not, and that we have an opportunity to have this deep compassion for one another. And I think that's what we're all really longing for. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be loved. And who better than other people who have experienced this similar, really devastating, unbearable pain that lots of other people are not going through at that time, and have a hard time pausing to understand or really make the space and time for. um, so we wanted to also not duplicate what was already happening in the community. So there were more support groups, where you take turns speaking. I'm sure, people understand that concept, but also our world doesn't give us good tools. So nobody gave a grief class in high school or college and said, when you have a loss or a divorce, or you move away from college, like what you just did, from your home and lose all your friends and all that, these are things that you can do to help it feel better or to get through. And by the way, you're normal and natural, and that what you're feeling is not unusual. Nobody does that. So to make a space where it's just, recognizing, um, we have limited tools. So, hey, let's try out all these things, and you don't have to do anything but show up. So we do a whole variety that touches on this holistic approach of things. And people also get to pick and choose. If that month it doesn't really vibe with them, then they might not participate, but they might say, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do pottery. I've always wanted to, go to that ocean clinic with that nonprofit. We partner with people in the community, and we offer something to do or try, in addition to an opportunity to share and be with one another.
That when I first talked to you about this, I was really struck about how you integrated your beautiful Hawaiian culture with grief. And I think it's very unique. I remember getting off the phone with you thinking, that is amazing. And it is so needed because, you can't just talk your way through or out of grief. It's because you're just replaying things in your mind, and we are mind, body, and spirit. And you're really integrating all of those things together. So tell us about your team, and just tell us why that matters so much, because there is, when we go through trauma, there is our nervous system is on overload, which many people's are, and the world is on overload right now. And so that embodiment, the physical portions are important. So just talk to me through like the different ways that you approach this, because I think it's really, really amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, grief, affects all the parts of our lives, right? All the
Right.
parts of us. And for us to really recover ourselves in some meaningful way, we have to really address all the parts of us. And although we're whole, we can also take time to separate and acknowledge. And not everybody can really, needs to do the same things or has to try different things. So, with Hawaiian culture, in like Grayson, our team has a team of experts, right? So everyone does their own thing and comes and creates programs around what they're really good at or what their life has called them to do. So Kumu is in Hawaiian teacher. And so he's a cultural practitioner, but he also has a master's in psychology. So it's a way for him to use la'aulapa'au, which is like a traditional Hawaiian plant medicine, and lomi lomi, which is like a cultural practice of massage, to address like the body. Of course, we hold grief in our body. So Lomi
Yeah.
Lomi helps kind of move that energy and everything, but it's actually more holistic. It's taking care of the whole person. It's intuitively tuning into energy, building trust on the table. And then also like, how do we move that through the person in and out? Like if we're holding all of that grief and stress in one place, how do we approach the muscles and massage that out, and using energy and spirit? So Hawaiian culture actually, is holistic by by nature, in the sense where even if it's plant medicine, using the plants, but also tuning in to Kiakua, which is God. It's a different way of approaching the spirit as well. So if if there's a lot of like negativity attached to God and church and that kind of community and those kinds of things, it's another way to just tune into more the truth of that, whatever you call it, however you can resonate with that higher power, and then using the plants as sort of like the invitation, or he says like the handshake, the friend. So teaching, what is it about, how do we use this, and then also reviving that culture that's been lost and oppressed in Hawaii. People haven't been able to speak the Hawaiian language a lot or integrate that into everything that we've done, and it's perpetuating that Hawaiian culture. Whether or not you have Hawaiian ancestry, being born and raised here, I feel a direct connection, and also the aloha spirit. Like, people talk about that in Hawaii when you come, like there is a sense of like community and family and togetherness and love, and aloha is part of, or should be a part of, our everyday being and way of being. So using the sand, the ocean, there's all these traditional ways, and of course, right, the nature is beautiful, and connecting and tuning in back again kind of helps ground us and center us back in our healing process. And then allowing different cultural practices where we can kind of leave our grief into mother nature and ground to take care of it, and it's sort of like an internal Marie Kondo-ish, where you're
Mhm.
sorting through all of the things and thanking them, but no longer
Mhm.
needing them,
Yeah.
without really being aggressive about that. Just being able to say, oh, I no longer need you anymore, and this is something I really want to set aside. Um, and then we do have a sibling program, because that siblings often don't have a chance to be recognized and to have a place for their healing. They see these grieving parents who have very little energy and maybe aren't able to like tune in or be as present anymore in their grief, and things are different, and they often want to take care of the parents or have these other roles. So we have a child life specialist who's a bereavement specialist. She's the one who authored our children's book, and then our co-author, she's a licensed marital therapist, like family and marital therapist, and she's also an art therapist, and then she's getting certified in nature mandalas. So this all these different ways to engage in, I guess, therapy, besides like sitting on someone's couch or just only having, we do have share, in support, but it's just offering just tools and things and different people and personalities, and then oftentimes I get to take a seat and be the bereaved parent instead of
Hmm.
having to be the leader of these modalities and these programs.
Wow. What I was struck by that is that, sometimes in, I think, American culture, there is this sense, or I don't even know if that's the right way to define it, but in this Western culture that we live in, there's this sense of, you know, uh, I'll give you advice and you follow these things and then you'll be better. We write books that way, we consume social media that way. We have people as a culture, it's like we're always looking to someone else. And what I think is very true is that when we're helping somebody heal, we are holding space for them. We are giving them an opportunity to move through their own story. And what you're doing is you're giving tangibility to that, if you will, through, touch and through connection to nature. And, as I listen to you talk about that, it's almost like that is what we intuitively need. I mean, I remember ran a lot after Ethan died, and just the feeling of my feet on the pavement, the 1 2 1 2, it's like my brain needed that, and there were just different things. It's like we need to heal in our body and our minds and our spirits, you know, and our emotions. It's a holistic thing. So I just think you're really on to something, and I think it's really powerful. And I think it's just really, really needed, I just I applaud you and Grayson for bringing this to life, right? Because it's through his love that it even exists at all. It's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So, the world is a very hard place right now, and we, we're not looking for answers, but I think, we're recording this podcast. There is currently Russia has invaded Ukraine, and the things that we're seeing. I mean, I will tell you, I have been undone by it, undone. Just I think when you go through something like we've been through, watching trauma, being witness to other people's experiences through our nonprofit work, and knowing what it's like to watch your children suffer and to try to shield your other children from grief, from the trauma, right? Because we've done that with it. We've tried to, it has undone me. And I'm just wondering if we can provide any ideas for people listening of what practices or things that they can do in their daily life if they are just feeling really heavy by the status of our world.
Yeah. You know, um, this is a tough question, right? And I
Yeah.
think that it happens over and over in our world. Well, the truth is we'll never stop evil or darkness. I hate to even just use evil, but I mean, there are really hard things all the
Yeah.
time happening, whether we see them or not, whether they're on our TV or not. And the thing that comes to mind is just that we can't battle that darkness with more darkness. The
Mm.
only thing, what is that saying, bring that can do that is light and
Light. Yeah.
love. And maybe we don't always think that what we do in ourselves matter or here, but I think that we're all connected. I really am more and more and more. I'm so convinced that we're one. And that's
Mm.
why it matters so much what we do and how we treat every single other person that we come into contact with. Um, so before all of that, I think feeling the heaviness and hearing these stories and even trying to imagine what it's like to be trapped in the bomb shelter and not have food or be scared for your children, and these are people just like us.
Yes, they
They're not,
are.
they're just like shop owners and teachers and nurses and
Yeah.
people who are out there in the community, and this happens. It's not like they're very different than us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that raising our compassion for what other people are going through in the world is a good first step to hit pause on the rat race and that hamster wheel that we're running on and is exhausting us. For us to just imagine for 1 minute, like, oh, what would that be like? It's sort of also, as we've talked about, opportunity and invitation to like say, man, this could be me just as
Yes.
it could be them. So what is it with my opportunity witnessing this that I can do? Because there's a lot of things we cannot do. We cannot. Putin is his own. We're not going to be able to do anything to him. And resentment and anger and all of those things is like, right? You've heard this before: drinking poison and hoping somebody else is hurt, right?
Right.
So what we can do, I think, is take a moment, feel that, raise our compassion, really send just loving energy over to all those people that are there,
Mm-hmm.
and then decide how can we in our own lives make some sort of mini change or bring a new ounce of love into the world that could possibly bring our and the US has a huge influence on the world too. So like how we are in ourselves, in our nuclear family, in our community, in our state expands to our nation, expands to our world too, right? And so I don't know, maybe thinking like, yes, we feel very small, but that's one small step. Imagine if we all chose love every day or decided, and there are practical things that you can do too. There's people
Mhm.
out there who are giving practical ways to donate to the humanitarian crisis, to, these people who might be refugees that did never expected to deliver practical things, food and water and
Mhm.
supplies and things that people need on the ground. So I think there are things, and if you have the resources, ways to give back and do
Mhm.
something, but then there's also that just human to human um, way of connecting or thinking. You
Mhm.
can call it prayer, or just also offering yourself like an inner shift of like, okay, so in my own life, if this were to happen, or there was something unpredictable, like, how maybe would I want to be different today in my own
Yeah.
life?
That's really beautiful. I was watching the news the other night, and Anderson Cooper on CNN was interviewing a mother who was in a bomb shelter with her 3 children. And I started crying watching her. Like tears were flowing out of my eyes. I felt her, in that moment.
Mhm.
And he said to her, he's like, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm okay. I'm really okay." And I think he was taken back by her response. And I just was thinking to myself, I'm like, I remember when I was in the height of Ethan's illness and things were really bad, and it was not good. And people would ask me, and I'd say, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I really meant it in that moment, because I got the grace, talk about let Grayson. I had the grace for my calling, for my invitation at that moment.
Mhm.
And I really felt like that's what that woman was saying. Like she was like, I have grace for right
Mhm.
now, for this moment.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, after I heard her, I thought to myself, I am just going to pray and ask for tremendous grace for these people,
Yeah.
because somehow, for some reason, they're being called to this moment. I don't understand it, but
Yep.
we're all called to these moments in our life. And I don't have the answers, but I do believe we get some gifts to do it. And so I don't know, that's what
Yes.
I've come to a little bit in the last few days.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know what we can do until we're in that moment. We don't know what we can
Absolutely.
handle. So your comment triggered me to remember like one of my friends, and I was telling her, you know what? No matter what happens, either way, how it goes, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And now reflecting back and witnessing myself in my memory at that time, I was like, how could I even say that? Whether my son lives or dies, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, that grace we're experiencing in that moment, and it's not all clear then either, right? And it's a lot of processing and
No.
moving back and looking back. But like, you're right, don't underestimate the people in Ukraine, and they have fought back,
Oh,
and
they're
they're
incredible.
finding their bravery, and they are having this opportunity in a way which sounds horrific in some points, but it is, and it's life. And I think that when we can step back and take a look at life in that way, like, oh, it's not supposed to be easy. And actually, the things that are really painful are the things that have grown me the most. And so, how can we look at this as something, an opportunity to learn? Of course, there's going to be tears, and it hurts, and it's awful, and it feels bad at sometimes. But as long as we kind of keep coming back, or reminding ourselves, or finding a way back to center, how can we, and you've talked about this, make use of our suffering
Mm-hmm.
in a way that feels good,
Yeah.
you know? And I think all the greatest minds and the most inspiring people out there that I've read, everyone says the same thing in their own life version. That
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of all of the same kind of concepts articulated uniquely in their own way. Of course, for all different people to receive the message, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, whew, we
Yeah.
just gotta
Yeah.
show up with what we got,
Yeah.
all wounded and broken, and just try something. Because if we sit and do nothing, we know what's gonna happen. Nothing.
Exactly. And we're not wrapping this up in a bow. We're not saying
No,
any of this is easy. This is
never.
messy, and
Oh,
this is complicated, and this
oh,
is sometimes we're like, screaming and kicking our way through things, but showing up in these spaces and believing that we are in the life that we're called to in this moment, there is something empowering about that. And I believe it for all of us. I want to, as we kind of wrap up, I want to talk about signs, because I want to know, do you believe in signs from heaven? Like, have you experienced that?
Yes, 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 yes. Yes. And I never had that experience before until Grayson died.
Mm.
And I think there's a desperate like want to stay connected, right? And their physical
Sure.
selves are not there. So you are definitely seeking and thinking about what happened, where did he go? Like quantum physics says the energy just transitions to something else. So then how is it tangible? But I think even before Grayson died, when he was more in like a coma state with the brain
Mhm.
tumor, that kind of happened longer and longer periods where he wasn't speaking and talking. There were moments where I felt like his soul was speaking to me, or
Mm.
I was able to communicate with him in a way where I got messages and understood. And sometimes it's that essence, and for sure. So I started seeing hearts, all kinds of hearts. So it'd be like, oh, that's funny. That rock looked like a heart. Or like, oh, I started noticing like, oh, plop goes the baby food. I had an infant and it's like, oh, in the shape of a heart. Or it's like that
Mm.
leaf. And I had never noticed that before. And it took me a little bit. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think that these hearts are like for me. I think that these are actually for me. And that was the first kind of like way that I started documenting and finding and giggling because they would come when I needed them, or not a reminder, or like I was sad, or just any time. And then over time, it's been like triple numbers. And I feel like I've seen every single triple number license plate on Oahu
Wow.
in front of me every day. Like it's just constant and all the time. I 100% believe in angel science. I think that we all can receive love from that realm, which we cannot use our five senses to detect, but that we have to open our hearts to that in a way where we can also receive, and that it is my daily bread. It is
Mhm.
something that continues to offer me hope, and that I can continue on and to know I'm loved and supported by an army of unseen angels and guides. And that's so powerful to tap into that. And I had heard somebody talk about a near death experience, and the way that she experienced what we call heaven, or that afterlife, was the essence of unconditional love. And she thought that's what God was. And when
Mm.
I actually felt that in my heart, like that resonated with me so much, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings, but when you feel it in your body and your soul and all the parts of you, and it is 100% real, but unseen, untouchable, untastable, unfeelable, it is the truth. And I just feel like that unconditional love continues to guide and encourage and love, and I love like being connected, and so that that is accessible all the time, no matter what. And it's always the truth, and it's always the something I can trust and depend and lean on and be
Mhm.
in. But yeah, heaven is always speaking, I feel like, and I love it.
I believe that too. And I think it's a choice, to live beyond our five senses. We're in such a five sensed world, right? But there's so much, I feel the same. I think it's a beautiful opportunity to think beyond that and to connect. So I want to ask you two more things before we end today. You just released a new book. You mentioned it at the beginning of the interview. So I want to, if you can just tell people a little bit about it and tell them where they can find it.
Sure. It's called My Journey with the Wind, a magical story of grief. It was written by our child life specialist, who's also a bereavement specialist. And it's about a grieving sibling. And the main character kind of starts off and is taken on a magical journey from her tear into all of these different experiences, a lot through nature, the emotion rainbow, treasure box, the tsunami storm, a comforting shore experience, and really recognizing at the end that all along her brother had always been there,
Hmm.
and that she could still connect with him, and through all the memories and love, and nature is a big part of helping her discover that he's always been there. And then there's a second portion of the book which I think makes it really unique, is that there's like activity pages in the
Oh,
back. So
cool.
our therapist, our who works with children, and our child life specialist and bereavement specialist the three of us actually collaborated together. I brought the bereaved mother experience to it, and what kind of helped in thinking in that way. Like, how do we journal and and doodle and color and create and do some art therapeutic activities, meditation, and it's like a real way, right, all in one, to read the story and then go through these activities in no specific order, and in the same language with a caregiver, a parent, somebody who's a therapist, a hospice. It really is for teacher, anyone who is guiding a child, and being able to engage with them in these therapeutic activities at the end, right then and there, and in relation to the story. So all of the activities, are ways to process what we've just read and go back and move through. And I think that's what makes it the most unique, is that it's a story and a way to have this interactive therapeutic activity processing
You're back
space.
to the integration that you're doing. I love it. And it's such, I mean, kids need these tools. So I'm really excited to get a copy of it myself. And so we'll definitely link it in the show notes so that people can take a look at that. And we'll also link Let Grace In as an organization if you'd like to make a donation or support their amazing work. I like to end all of my podcasts by asking my guests the same question. So this is my final question. I'm curious to know what tool or piece of advice has served you best in becoming the Gabby that you are today.
Well, that's such a tough question.
I know it's a hard question. It is.
The first thing that kind of came up for me was just to keep going.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
I
I love
feel
that.
like heaven has always had that same encouragement. I would do therapy sessions or deep meditative sessions, and I'm like, it's the same message over and over. Like, yay, just keep going, like your aunt isn't like, don't stop working, don't stop growing, don't stop believing, don't stop hoping, continue to flex those virtues, like our body's physical muscles, right? I love that idea of like flexing our spiritual muscles. And then although our grief stays the same, we'll always miss our children, there's that sadness and that heaviness, and life's experiences keep coming, that if we grow our big spiritual muscles around it, we can hold it differently, or we can steady it, or we can embrace it differently. So I think that idea of like, and it's so simple, anyone can do it, right? Just keep going,
Just keep
just keep
going.
going, keep seeking, keep loving, keep going, keep doing. I just go for it.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of wrapped up all in that.
I could not agree more. And I think that's a great way to end our conversation today. Keep going. So thank you, Gabby, for being with me here today. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And I just love everything about you. So thank you.
Oh, same. Thank you, Jessica. What a blessing. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining me here on the Heartstrong podcast. Please rate and review this podcast and share an episode that you love with a friend. And when you do, it helps us continue our mission of encouraging people to grow through the challenges in their lives. This podcast is brought to you by the Ethan Lindbergh Foundation and the Heartstrong Collective. To learn more about our work, please visit theheartstrong.com. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Heartstrong podcast.